This episode of Calling It Now was brought to you by my generous supporters on Patreon. Let's begin.
And you did it right from the start.
Hey everyone, Suede here. It's been hectic the last month or so, with episode after episode taking longer than I expected, but now after a too long break, I think it's time to bring back this short journey on a boat made from ice cream cones I like to call Calling It Now. Last time we looked into how our Western superheroes look through an Eastern lens, and one of the best examples of that surprisingly fruitful subgenre is of course One's amazing deconstruction, One Punch Man. But can One's scathing, sardonic and supremely silly eye provide us with a burst of equally off-the-wall insight into more Eastern traditions and mythology? Well, I want to find out, so let's lay down our seals, wave our branches around, and get on with it! Before that though, rules. This is a show where I look at anime that either I or the general population maybe never got round to seeing by watching, or perhaps subjecting myself to, the very first episode. I give a brief synopsis, provide my personal, subjective opinion on whether I would keep watching based on this episode alone, and then call it now as to how the show's going to turn out. I understand that one episode is not enough to get a handle on most shows overall, but the first impression is still meant to hook you, and I'm just commenting on whether or not I would buy it. Along the way, there's going to be some audience participation in the form of guessing what's going to happen next, so prime your trope sensing chakras and let's get started. This month's anime was commissioned by POB, who must have seen something strange in the neighborhood. Now, I'm currently working through a long backlog of commissions, so they aren't going to open back up again for a while, but when they do, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So, if you haven't guessed by now, we're looking at Mob Psycho 100, the 2016 anime based on the 2012 manga, produced by the well-pedigreed studio Bones, known for such classics as Full Metal Alchemist and My Hero Academia, and directed by Yuzuru Tachikawa, a first-time series director who nonetheless has some serious single-episode experience with fingers in Steins Gate, Attack on Titan, and Kill la Kill. Who knows where this could go? Well, anyway, I solemnly swear on my honor, such as it is, that I went into this episode completely blind, with even the production research being done after the fact. So we open with. You know, I did always wonder what would happen if Michael Bay and David Lynch ever collaborated, and now I guess I don't have to anymore. So after the glowy boy reaches level 100 and breaks the game due to how OP he is, we get to the title and... You don't say. Not much of a revelation there after that glimpse into Hideaki Anno's worst night ever, but I guess it's still appreciated. The narration goes on to say that although ghosts and really handsy spirits exist and terrify the populace, psychics around the world keep them at bay. So after that opening and setup, where do you think the show will go from there? Well, call it now, if you haven't seen the show, obviously. A, we get a group of ghost-busting psychics prepping for a big exorcism. B, we see someone trying to shamelessly profit from being a psychic using peak capitalism. Or C, we meet your average high schooler who's about to be thrust into a world not seen by Joe Public. And the answer is...
で、報酬の話なんですけど、お試し A コーステスト 20%、真面目 B コースだと 50%、本気の C コースだと 99%。
B, give yourself 2 points if you got this or any future questions right, and wrong answers subtract 1 point to a minimum of 0. Yes, it appears even legitimate paranormal phenomena can't stop humanity's innate urge to grift, as Sweet Navel Orange here attempts to sucker a visiting Pop Team Epic character out of as much money as possible, much to the chagrin of her boyfriend.
ちょっと待った！あんた！
That's funny, his name's Taro and his head looks like a peach, referencing the legend of Momotaro. Anyway, we learned that the lady in question has been having severe nightmares where a certain building features prominently, all while showcasing a really unique and refreshing art style that seems to allow for more fluid animation, which I'm definitely down for. Unfortunately, it appears Sweet Navel Orange isn't as down for the whole exorcism thing as was originally thought, as though the spirit really exists and manifests itself in an astoundingly creative manner, he's not so easily banished, partly due to Sweet Navel thinking salt is enough to banish spirits when it needs to be blessed first, much like water in the West. So cornered by the, I want to say vengeful, but he really just seems to be more hanging out and doing his ungodly business, Orange brings out his secret weapon, which turns out to be, call it now, A, a middle schooler in a bowl cut, B, an incantation that the spirit agreed to react to because they're in cahoots, or C, a holy Pez dispenser. And the answer is... A. In fact, he did probably the most sensible thing you can do in this situation. He called the main character. I'm serious.
彼の名は影山茂雄、通称モブ。そしてこの物語の主人公である。
So, approximately a third of the way through the episode, it begins. I joke, but this is actually pretty neat. One of the best ways to build a world is to show that it functions outside of the main character, so I'm digging it. So after the actual opening, which is so familiar and feel to the first scene, it feels like the episode is simply starting again, we're treated to a lovely visual pun where we see two crows, which represent idiocy in anime, fly away from the office as Sweet Navel counts his money and gives Ballcut a generous percentage of the take.
どうも
Then we follow Bowl Cut home and see that psychic powers really aren't that big a deal, at least in his family.
またこの子はスプーン曲げていい加減直しなさいよそのくせ
Jeez, what is this, a Pokemon universe? Oh, and we also meet his brother, who may not live up to the trope, but at least at the moment is wearing a gigantic neon sign driven into his skull with the words, "I will die or turn evil" written on it.
なんか悩みがあるなら言ってよ兄さん
Oh, Nii-san, no matter what happens in my crazy life, I at least know my respect for you will never be used for an easy turning point in my character growth. Well, so far so shonen, and now it's time to follow Bowl Cut to his school where he meets with his next appointed cliché, though admittedly this one is delightfully twisted by welcome weirdness. What is it? Call it now A, his schoolyard chum digging his way into the girls' locker room with a shovel, B, his schoolyard bully, a sentient fish with a cat bodyguard, or C, his schoolyard crush surrounded by living vegetables. And the answer is... C. Yeah. I mean, it's established to be a fantasy, but does that mean he views all humans as vegetables except those he's infatuated with? Well, anyway, we see that he's a pretty mediocre student that's not exactly a pariah, but very just below average. Then he gets a call from Sweet Navel Orange for another job, and we get this masterpiece of foreshadowing. Dang, way to take Hitchcock's advice on giving audience information to the extreme. Then the duo arrive at a tunnel where apparently over 30 people died. After we continue to see just how much of a phony Orange is through fantastic character animation. We finally meet the main ghost while Bowl Cut does all the work, and he tells us the tragic backstory of his postmodern posse, which is certainly on brand for this show. Call it now. A, he was a renowned interpretive dance leader whose troupe met a terrible fate after a flash mob went horrifically wrong. B, he was a motorcycle gang leader whose crew got into a pile-up after his bike slipped on a banana peel. Or C, he was a preacher who took his caroling group to the wrong side of town. And the answer is... C. Hey, I'm sure we've all been there. So of course Bowl Cut is able to easily dispatch the spirits using weaponized bursts of Sakuga, but apparently this wasn't the worst spirit. No, there's a much more malevolent entity giving the gang their orders, and Bowl Cut wants to check it out, much to Sweet Navel Orange's chagrin. Apparently this ancient spirit is also responsible for all the unexplained deaths in the area, with the hilarious exception of the bikers.
じゃあお前らもそいつに
いや、俺たちはバナナの皮を踏んだだけだ。
So Bowl Cut faces the eldritch abomination, a swarming cloud of eyes and teeth that immediately devours him. So what do you think's going to happen next? Call it now. A, he defeats it easily, One Punch Man style. B, he remains devoured, giving us a Psycho-style twist as a clever nod to the title. Or C, he's sent to the spirit realm where Orange has to rescue him. And the answer is... A. Yes, it seems this really is an Eastern variation on the mangaka's most famous work, with Bowl Cut making quick if spectacular work of the Netherworm, sending the biker gang peacefully to the other side and going out for ramen. Oh, and of course Orange orders more meat for himself.
はいチャーシュー追加すんなら2枚までにしとけよわかりました
Well, that was Mob Psycho 100. Did it hook me? Technically, yes, but it's with some concerns. Those concerns can take a flying leap for the moment, though, because holy crap, is this refreshing animation. I mean, it's possible that they completely blew the budget on the first episode, but even allowing for that, let's get the obvious out of the way. I'm aware that the aesthetic itself may put some people off, but for me, holy crap, is this animation awesome. I love how many unique poses and angles they come up with to emphasize expressions in ludicrous ways, and I especially love how, even though it works incredibly well as pure spectacle, the fluid animation always serves a purpose. Whether it's big and obvious things like the shifting, writhing, constant motion on the supernatural elements adding to the otherworldliness of the scene, or subtle things like Orange's ludicrous hand flourishes accentuating how much of a fake showman he must be when even his hand movements are flashy but worthless. I also like the overall art style too, very rough and ready and closer to one's unique artistry. Sure, it's not the most visually pleasing, but to be honest, what I like the most about it is that it evokes a 14-year-old sketchbook in both style and content. Ugly caricatures, even unbroken lines, designs that look like you just kept adding and adding to them over the course of a boring maths class. It gives an added element to the feeling of high school angst that pervades the proceedings, and I dig it a lot. Honestly, the only misgivings I have are at a story level. Although the jokes are fun and the slapstick is great, we really don't get much of a feel for where our story or characters are going to go. I'm also concerned that at the moment it really does just seem like One Punch Man but slightly more grounded and with ghosts, and while that's not such a bad thing, I can see it getting tiresome really quickly. That in mind, would I watch it to the end if I had time? Well, I'm a sucker for a ticking clock device, and this one admittedly has a doozy. It depends a lot on how how long it takes before a new wrinkle or perspective comes in, or how much of a payoff occurs when that timer ticks over 100, but the setup, humor, and design is so strong that I'd definitely give it at least 5 more episodes. It has the potential to be fantastic as long as it doesn't fall into the incredibly obvious potential pitfalls ahead. But do I think it'll go that route? Well, calling it now, I think that there'll be a few more monster hunting episodes where Boldcut dispatches Lovecraftian abominations while subtly humiliating Orange, but for the most part it'll be more about how he's able to handle high school, with his psychic power only manifesting itself in ways to make things worse for his high school cred. Then after about 4 episodes or so, we'll see the spirit underworld start to organize against him, and even though he's able to defeat them easily for the most part, they'll still eventually shake him up to the point he's unsure if he's even cut out for it. Then Boldcut's brother is killed in a humorous manner about halfway through, and he becomes the ultimate overfiend, as he was really just hiding his true feelings of hatred beneath the surface. This leads to Boldcut exploding, not in any kind of psychic way, but in finally taking a stand for himself and chewing his brother out for acting nice but never actually being there for him. After that, he's able to move on, and Boldcut lives a normal life while Orange exploits him to get fat stacks on the side. Now, disclaimer, I'm fully aware that this is almost certainly not what's going to happen due to how unpredictable the show seems to thrive on being, but I have to guess something. But what am I talking about? That's way too convoluted. Obviously, what's really going on is that the entire thing is a prequel to Akira. Orange is the large blue boy from the movie, Boldcut's crush is the blue girl, the runaway blue boy is Boldcut's brother, and Boldcut himself is, of course, Akira. Their designations and ages are all code names in the original movie, and as we get closer to 0 hour, we realize that the ghosts all the main characters see are actually hallucinations caused by their hideous genetic therapy. This is why Boldcut's parents seem so blasé about his psychic prowess, and why Orange plays it down to him. Then, after Boldcut is eventually pushed to the absolute breaking point by a mixture of high school antics and hidden experimentation, he finally explodes into the opening shot of the movie. It's so obvious. Alright guys, I'm running late and I need to record this while Seth's asleep. That's my son. So shh, I'm just gonna call out everybody right now, alright? John, Joel Young, B.O.B., Alison Bennett, Jonathan Powell, Matt Stores, Goose Rice Boats, Calvin Atkinson, Carter Gitsune, Christian Larson, Mitchell Ickerman, Colleen, Wesley Fox, Ginkgo, Daniel Waldron, Lucas Newmeyer, The Tom Smith, Colin Ryder McRae, Deep Cover, Thomas Halkin, Kiseki77, Brandon A. Hall, Dylan Lewis, Henry H., Tristan Payne, Yui Senpai, Max Babington, Joel Schooler, Kelly Elfson, Adam One-Eye, Kururu, Wandering Poem, Ingvald Patterson. Then there's also Trey McGowan, the Awesome Rooster, Mark Dean, the Awesome Card Player, Grant Gangle, the Awesome Lynch, Colleen French, the Awesome Wheelchair, Tiki 101, the Awesome Straw Hat, Zachary Taylor, the Awesome President, I'm assuming, Stephen Walker, the Awesome Brooding Person, Dark Master, the Awesome Shiny Charizard, James Nicholson, the Awesome Telmise, Wheels, the Awesome Infographic, Jonathan Johnson, the Awesome Everything, Super Buddy Bun, the Awesome Bunny, and Loomsy96, the Awesome Red Ranger, Andrew Welsh, the Awesome Relaxation Master, and Cameron McLeod, just flippin' awesome. Look at him, he's amazingly awesome. Then there are the patrons whose art hasn't been done yet. I'm sorry, I will get round to them as soon as possible. Oliver, Joe, Sean Ryan, Evan Bow, Kyle Brackman, Joseph Strimling, Fusionator, there's Death Animated, William L. Reese, Ian. So that was Mob Psycho 100. Remember that this is still early days and I'm always looking for feedback. Thanks for indulging, and calling it now, you're going to do one of Sweet Navel Orange's hand flourishes this week without even thinking about it.
Something strange